Hi, I'm Jack Canfield, and welcome back to another segment of Talking About Success. With me today is Star Holmes, the author of Transitional Wisdom, a guide to healthy aging and completing life with dignity, and the Transitional Wisdom Action Journal as well. Star helps families navigate the challenges of aging and illness. So what led you to this work of working with the aging and this whole issue of the challenges of aging and illness?
Well, I was doing consulting work at the time that my mother was diagnosed with dementia. And I found myself coming down to Laguna Beach, where I grew up, and spending about a week a month with her. And I had other family members that would come down and help as well. And we hired somebody. So during this process of my mother's decline, a lot of people just think, when they get dementia, they lose themselves and you really can't have that same relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I am trained in neurolinguistic programming. And so I decided I was just going to spend time, you know, asking her more about herself. So when she would have one of those stories that was just repetitive, I would just take her deeper and deeper into her story. And it was amazing because she would go to a place where there was like this aha moment and she will resolve something and that particular story wouldn't come up again. So I was so inspired by the transformation she made over the last 2 years of her life. And I realized that there's really something here that we as family members and caregivers can do to support our loved ones as they complete their lives.
Now, you mentioned something called neuro-linguistic programming. Some of our viewers might not know what that is. How does helping, first of all, what is neuro-linguistic programming, and how does knowing that help people? I know you put some of that in your book, but unpack that a little for our
Yeah.
viewers.
Well, I have a very simplistic definition of neurolinguistic programming, or NLP as many people know it.
Mm-hmm.
It is how the brain processes and stores information.
Mm-hmm.
And by being able to go in and identify where people put this information and how they've stored it, we can actually change it so that it reflects not the old 5-year-olds where many of our stories come from, but what's really going on in the present moment.
Very interesting. So why do you feel that working with caregivers and people working with you is so important?
I believe that well, right now I'm a caregiver for my father,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been a caregiver for a couple of family members. And what I have discovered is that there are issues. There are old family of origin issues that come up whenever there's stress. And whenever people are caring for a loved one who's ill or aging, there are going to be stressful times. So these old things come in and they interfere with our ability to be able to be present with the people that we love. So I think that the very best place to work is with those caregivers to help them resolve those old things. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example.
Sure.
Years ago, as you know, I lost my birth mother when I was 3, and I was adopted at the age of 6. And um, I had a lot of things that happened to me between, the ages of 3 and 6 that were just not great things. And I came into this new family with the idea that there was something broken in me, something wrong with me. And so whatever happened, I would use it. It would like stack on top of that story I made of myself. So my mother and I were never super close. But when I was 10, I was one of these little workaholics. I did. I would babysit all the time. I would go collect newspapers and take it down and sell it to the pottery barn so I wouldn't be a burden.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was 10, I saved money for a Christmas present because my mother had always gone around and said, "Oh, my feet are so cold, my feet are so cold." So I bought her these slippers that I just, thought she was going to love. And Christmas came and Christmas left, and this wrapped present stayed under the tree. My mother never opened it. And for me, the message that I got was that I wasn't good enough. My gifts weren't good enough.
Mm.
And I carried that with me for a really long time. But from that time, I found myself removing myself more and more from the relationship with my mom. And fortunately, when I was in graduate school, I went through a program where we did family of origin interviews. And we did a lot of stories, a lot of work on those old things that happened to us so that we could learn to really be present with our clients instead of being hooked by our old stuff. And I worked through a lot of those kinds of old stories and healed a lot of things in myself. So I knew that that story about the slippers wasn't about me.
Mm-hmm.
So when my mom got to a stage where she really couldn't be alone, we moved her to Oregon because I was living in Oregon at the time. And I was down there cleaning out her house with her. And I came upon the slippers. Now, at that point, because I had done the work on it, there was no more heat. I wasn't, feeling like she was a bad person or she didn't love me. But I was curious. So I brought the slippers out and I said, Mom, the slippers, these are the slippers I bought for you back when I was 10 years old. And you never opened them. And you never wore them. Tell me, what was that about? And my mom just sat down and she said, from the time you were adopted, I just felt like you worked too hard. I wanted you to be a child. I wanted you to have fun. I wanted you to get out. And I did not want you going out working to earn money to get something for me. So I was going to take those back and give you the money back. But I
Wow.
could never bring myself to take the slippers back. What a reframe.
What an amazing story.
Yeah.
It's interesting how as children we take little events and we make decisions and tell ourselves stories and run it for our whole lives in some cases, but you got to heal that. That's beautiful.
Yeah. And I, more than healing it, because I felt like I had healed it
It's
before,
before, sure.
but I had an understanding for my mother that I never knew. I
Mm-hmm.
did not know that she saw me,
Mm-hmm.
but she did. She really saw me and she related to me as a little kid. And that meant, I can't tell you how much that meant to me.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the kinds of shifts I like to help families make so that then suddenly those old things are gone and we can see each other in the current moment for who we really are.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you work with families, you do seminars, you consult, you speak on these issues. Can you share a story about someone you've worked with or some client you've had?
You know, the the one that I think was probably profound for me
Mm-hmm.
in a shift that I made back when I first started doing my workshops, I, just went down to the printer and did, one of these very inexpensive journals. You know the old kind.
Right.
I'm flying by the seat of my pants. But the journal has all of the exercises that I use in my workshops. And I had this woman, 72-year-old woman, go through the workshop. And, everybody fills out the journal, and we have a lot of experiential exercises so that people can go deep in really seeing where they are, where they've been, and where they want to be. This woman, went through the process like everybody, and then I didn't see her again. 6 months later, her daughter calls me, and she said, "Hi, I'm Sheila. My mother was Martha, and I wanted to let you know that she passed away suddenly. She was only 72. We had no idea. She just went to sleep one night and didn't wake up the next day. But I've been going through her things and I found her journal." She said, "I want you to know how grateful I am that she had this, that you helped her to be able to go through this. I learned so much about my mom reading her journal. And the only regret that I have is that she didn't share it with me while she was alive. But she thought she had a long time, you know?
Mm-hmm.
We all have that expiration date and none of us know when it is.
Exactly.
So now, I've really reframed how I work with people and I share that story so that when they're completing their journals, they can understand how important it is to sit down with their families so their families can really get an idea of who they are. And the journal here, the thing that I love about it is I made it really beautiful inside.
Mm-hmm.
And I did it because when people grow old and when they pass away, this will be left for their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren who may never have met them. And there are things that I ask in this, you know, what have you done in your life that's really made a difference? You know, for yourself, that you felt proud of, that was important, that really was part of your mission? What kinds of things have you done that's made a difference in your family, in your community? And how is the world different because you were here? When children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren can read that years later, not only do they know the name and the date of their ancestor, but they understand the values that their ancestors lived by.
Mm.
So it's just a way for me to bring that history in a rich way to families.
You know, I think that's important too. I took a seminar once and it was about passing on your wealth to the next generation. And everyone was asked the question, if you could only give your life lessons and your values to your grandchildren or your children or your money, which would you pick? And everybody said my values and my learnings, my wisdom. And then we were asked, and what are you doing to make that happen? And everyone was like, I don't know.
I've heard that one before too.
So the Transitional Wisdom Action Journal, this is a opportunity to capture that and be able to pass it on to the next generation. That's really beautiful. So almost in every field, there's usually some myth or some misinformation that people have. So what would it be in your field?
So many people I talk to, when their loved one gets ill or gets, you know, some form of dementia, and even with cancer, when you're doing chemo and you're doing, you know, radiation, you can have memory gaps. It's just part, they call it chemo brain. People write them off. Well, there's my, you know, mother or grandmother or father with that same old story again.
Mm.
You know, they're not really themselves anymore. That's one that I hear really frequently. And that is just not true. People of any age still have goals, they still have things that are important to them.
Mm-hmm.
And here, an example. My mother, I had her in an adult foster home close to an adult daycare center that specialized with people with dementia. And I lived about an hour away, so I would have her come and stay with us on the weekends. And her sister, her last sibling, passed away. And, you know, I went over and I told her that her sister was gone. And, you know, it sort of sunk in. And then I left. And that night, the caregiver calls me and says, "Oh, your mother is just hysterical and we can't calm her down. You know, can we medicate her?" And I said, "My mother's little sister just died. She's grieving, just like all of us grieve when we lose somebody." And people forget,
Mm-hmm.
just because she has dementia, that she wouldn't have these experiences. So, of course, I came right over and spent some time with her, and we really talked about all the good stories and the things she remembered about her little sister. And understanding that it had been her sister's time to go, she was able to come to some kind of peace with that. And so I really encourage my clients and really anybody out there, when people are of an advanced age, don't write them off. They have experiences to share with us. They have wisdom to share with us. And even when they have dementia, they still have these things that we will really value for the rest of our lives if we take the time to really hear it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's true. I think we often, at terms, infantilize our elders, you know, start treating them like little babies again and
Yeah.
not realize there's real people in there that still have feelings and thoughts and memories and all of that. I've seen it in the hospitals. I've seen it in, you know, homes. So it's good. So listening, asking questions, knowing the person has feelings is important, not just medicating because it's convenient to end the uncomfortable communication, let's call it that way. Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
I mean, even with my dad, he's 97.
Hmm.
He's lost a lot of control.
Hmm.
And over time, that's something that happens. And I have come from a perspective that I want him to maintain as much control as he's able to handle for as long as he can. Let him make the decisions, and I will honor them
Hmm.
because he's an adult.
Hmm.
Just because he has difficulty walking and he can't hear very well and he can't see very well any longer does not mean he doesn't think.
Right. Very good. So you mentioned anybody out there in your last answer. So what advice or what wisdom or what could you share with people that are our viewers right now? As a parting shot, something that they can apply in their life right now in terms of this issue of aging and dealing with parents and perhaps siblings and other family members that are either aging or ill.
I'll tell a story around this
Hmm.
because it's so important. I believe the best thing you can do is validate their experience. And when my mother had first moved into the foster home, they called me and they were, in a panic, and they said, "Your mother is hallucinating. We would like to give her Haldol, which is an antipsychotic."
Hmm.
And I said, "No, I'll be there, in 40 minutes." And I got in the car and I just flew over there. So I sat down with my mom and I said, "Mom, what's going on?" And she said, "Well, they're leaving me." And I said, "Who's leaving you?" "All of my relatives. They're walking up the hill and I want to go with them."
Hmm.
And so I said, "Well, Mom, they'll be back. It's just not your time to go with them, but they'll be back for you when it is your time, when you're complete." And she just got this like total relief over her face. And she said, "Really? They'll be back for me?" And I said, "Absolutely." And no need for Haldol. Then she was just herself again.
Hmm.
So I encourage people to validate whether you believe that she was really seeing the spirits of her loved ones or not, doesn't matter.
Hmm.
The important thing is that she experienced that. And I entered into her world and supported that.
Hmm.
And no need for medication.
That phrase, I entered into her world. I remember my mother-in-law was hallucinating and seeing spiders on the wall, and everyone wanted to give her Haldol. And the question was, well, what do they look like? Tell me about them.
Yeah.
Like just go into the world and get involved, and then kind of walk them back out of the whatever the painful, scary part of that might be. As you did, they'll be back. Well, they're on the wall. They're not here. Where are they going? They'll eventually walk away. Whatever. And so that's so good. I love it. Very good. So you're a wise woman, and I love your book, Transitional Wisdom, because you've gained a lot of that. So Transitional Wisdom and the Transitional Wisdom Action Journal. If people want to get a hold of you, I assume the books are on Amazon.com and all the normal places.
Yes, they are.
Okay, good. And if people want to get a hold of you in terms of a consultant, to speak to them, to run a workshop, to give a speech, to coach them, whatever, where do they go? How do they find you?
The best way to get a hold of me is through email,
Hmm.
and all of my contact information is on my website. That's transitionalwisdom.com.
Transitionalwisdom.com.
Yeah.
Simple. Well, thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you so much, Jack.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Well, stay tuned. We'll be right back after this message.